My name is Michael Allen, and I'm going to be guiding you through this tutorial today to cover all the equipment that you need to be able to do 360 photography on a professional and enterprise class. So if you're looking for an entry-level system or an entry-level tutorial, this is not the tutorial for you. I will save you the time. This is more for the professional side. So if you're looking to have a budget between $10,000 and $30,000, $10,000 and $30,000, then this is a great tutorial. We're going to cover that end. We will have other tutorials down the line, and those will cover more of the entry-level stuff. But for now, this is the professional one. So let's dig into it. So first things first, we're going to talk about the computer. Okay, so this is the computer. This here is an example of a MacBook Pro with the M1 silicon chip. This is a fantastic computer because it has the system on a chip architecture. It's the Apple Silicon, and it's able to do a fantastic job with working with single-threaded programs. Now, when it comes to CPUs, it's really important to understand that when it comes to the editing process, that can really become a bottleneck. And if your CPU and GPU for your computer, if it's not quite up to speed, then it's going to really significantly slow down your image editing workflow. This is really important, especially if you're going to be shooting a really high volume of images. For example, if you're shooting thousands of products per week, then the computer needs to be set up right, because otherwise that can quickly become the weakest link for your workflow. This here is one of the top choices we have right now just because of the new Apple Silicon and how it works. It's just so fast, and also it's so good at reserving power, so it can work all day long, and there's very little wear and tear that happens on the CPU. The heat is really low. If you're working with an iMac that's maxed out, the cooling on those isn't quite as good. The Intel chips aren't quite as good in terms of power management. So if you're using it as a dependable, mission-critical part of your system, then you should definitely make sure that you're using a system that has really good cooling. Or if you're using something like this, it's just so efficient at the CPU that you don't have to worry about the cooling that much. So there it is. Now in terms of RAM, that's the next important part. There's been a lot of research out there that's been done. I'll save you the effort of having to go through it. If you have about 32 gigabytes of RAM, you're probably good enough. 64 is usually overkill, and 16 is generally the minimum we'd recommend for most applications. Unless, of course, you're using Apple Silicon. This has 16, but it acts as if it has about 32, just because of how they do resource management with the system on a chip. So there it is. Now the next thing we're going to talk about is external storage. So let's dig into that now. All right, so this is the storage system. Now, when it comes to storage, you can store the products on your hard drive. You can store it on an external storage device like this inside of your building, and you can also do cloud storage. There's advantages and disadvantages to each one. If you have everything stored on your computer, the advantages is that it's very fast. Writing from your computer to or your camera to your computer, it's very fast because the internal systems in the computer allow you to do really fast data transfer. Now, if you want to transfer the information from the computer to an external device like this, it's not quite as fast, but it still can be really fast. Now, if you want to transfer it from your computer to a cloud system, that's usually limited by the speed of your internet. And it depends on where you are. Sometimes if you have fiber internet, it can be really quick. But if you have normal internet, like cable internet or DSL, it can be extremely slow. So speed is a big one. Cost is another one as well. So let's dive into that right now. One of the worst ways to have a system set up is to have everything just on your computer. If you have that just on your computer, then unfortunately you're going to have some big issues if the computer crashes and you don't have a cloud storage backup. Also, you can run out of space really quick. That's where the external storage device comes in. So this here is a network-attached storage system. It's called a NAS for short. And this system here is basically a server. So this one here has 6 bays. Each bay is about 10 terabytes. So we got 60 terabytes of storage. Half of it's used for backup. The other half is used as the main. This one's set up as a RAID 10. You can also do a RAID 5 or RAID 6. There's a bunch of others, but we usually recommend doing RAID 10 just because it's pretty simple and easy to do. The speeds are very fast as well. So in terms of speeds, when you're doing video editing, it's usually best to have 10 gigabits per second for read and write. Over here on this side, we have the 10 gigabit port for doing the transfer. Standard, it comes with the 1 gigabit port. So each one of these is 1 gigabit per second. This is obviously 10 times slower than this, but at least you'll have something to be able to do data transfer. When it comes to photography, usually these are fine. If you want to have a really fast system that's maxed out to the highest degree possible, 10 gigabit is generally the best practice. So there's that. Now, in terms of cloud storage, if you're using a NAS, then the best thing to do is have this do an automatic data backup to a cloud service like Amazon Web Services or Backblaze. There's other ones too. Synology actually has their own cloud system that works really well. But any of those will be really good for having a backup just in case this gets damaged or stolen or lost. So there's the external storage. Now, one last thing I should cover before you get one of these. The RAM is not that important. If you're running it as an actual server, fine. But really, I think this comes with 4 gigabytes of RAM stock. We didn't know any better, but we actually bought, I think, 16 or 32 gigabytes of ECC RAM, which is super expensive, but it didn't make any difference on data transfer. So just keep that in mind. All right, so the camera is the next part of the system that's very important because it takes the pictures. A lot of people think that you need to spend all your money on the body and then they don't have any budget left over for the lens. That's a big mistake. You need to spend about half on the body and about half on the lens. As they say in photography, you tend to date the body and then you marry the lens. So that tends to be generally true. People don't hold on to the bodies quite as long as they hold on to the lenses for. So as long as you take good care of your lens, it should last a very long time, and it'll take really good care of you. So what we have here is a relatively standard entry-level system for 360 photography. This system here is a Canon 7D Mark II. Has about 20 megapixels. This camera works fantastic, and it does a good job at being able to take really high-resolution photos. It has a crop sensor, which is good because it extends the range of the depth of field a little bit, which makes it really nice and sharp. You can still do full frame. The depth of field will be a little bit narrower, and with 360 photography, you want everything to be as sharp as possible. You can compensate by having brighter lights. Okay, so let's dig into this. Right now we have a zoom lens. This is a 24 to 105 f4 lens. It's the L glass by Canon. This is the first gen. There's another gen too. And they're both really great. This one here is fantastic. You can pick one of these up used for about $450, and they'll take good care of you. So when it comes to choosing between a prime lens or a zoom lens, we generally recommend a zoom if you're going to be shooting a variety of products because you may need to zoom in to be able to get smaller objects, zoom out to get bigger objects. It's a pain in the butt to be able to have to move your camera back and forth in order to change the space between the product and the edge of the frame. So you want to make sure that you have a good amount of zoom capability. You can do primes if you're just shooting one thing. Like for example, if you're shooting diamond rings, then you want to make sure for sure that you have it as sharp as possible, but they also need some kind of macro capability. And generally the macro lenses are primes, so you're probably going to be stuck with a prime if you need to be doing really small stuff. But that shouldn't be a problem because small stuff usually doesn't change in size too much, so this should be okay. So that's the lens. One just pro tip you should keep in mind, if you're ever doing 360 photography, always turn the image stabilization off. And that'll keep the lens from floating around. It tends to cause some problems with making it look jittery as it spins around in the 360. There are some modifiers you can add to it. Like for example, right here we have what's called a polarizer. Polarizers are amazing tools. They're basically a filter that goes into the front of your lens. It screws on, and when you put it on, you're able to rotate this right here. And as it rotates, it's able to actually change the color that goes through the lens. Really what it does is it changes the reflection. That's what I meant to say. And the reflections are able to be completely hidden. So when you, for example, go from here to here, it'll actually get rid of all the reflections on the left and the right. If you go from here to here, 90 degrees, then it'll get rid of all the reflections on the top and the bottom of an object. So for example, if you're shooting a black glossy motorcycle helmet, then you can actually have full control over the reflections on the left and the right. So that's a really cool tool. Also a really, really great tool if you're shooting like diamond rings or jewelry or anything super reflective. All right, so that's the polarizer. All right, so color calibration is really critical when it comes to shooting certain types of products. You want to make sure that when you do color calibration, you're using it with a color chart. Right here we have what is called a color chart for color calibrating the products. What you'll do is you'll take a picture of this, and then in Photoshop or Lightroom or whatever editing program you use, this will be the standard to be able to calibrate the colors and make sure they're true and accurate. So all you have to do is just make sure that when you put it back, it has a special cover so that sunlight and stuff doesn't fade it over time. It's always good to put it in a nice dark space. All right, so this is the memory card. It's so simple, but so important. This is a SanDisk memory card. That's an SD card. It goes right into the camera. This one has 64 gigabytes of space, and it also has, I believe, 170 megabytes of read and write. That's usually sufficient for cameras with 50 megapixels or less. If you need more, then you might need to have a 300 megabyte per second read and write card. But those usually cost around 5 times more, but they only deliver about twice the speed, just to keep that in mind. You don't need more than what you actually need, so yeah. All right, so tethering cords. If you're not going to be putting the images onto an SD card and then transferring it manually onto your computer, then the next option, and what we recommend as the best option usually, is using a tethering system. So Canon has a great tethering system called EOS Utility. There's other programs such as Lightroom and Capture One, which is actually what we use internally for doing transfers for tethering. Now there's two types of cords. It depends on the kind of camera you have. If you have an earlier generation Canon 5D, then you're going to be stuck with a read speed using the USB 2.0 cords. Now if you're going to be using the faster generation, you'll know because this is called USB 3.1, and you can tell because there's actually a blue tip. If it's blue, that means it's USB 3.0, and it's going to be super fast. In fact, it's going to be really, really fast, about 5 gigabits per second. If you're going to be using one of these guys, you can tell that it's much slower. It's actually white. That's the big difference between the two. And it's going to go a lot slower. So it depends on the camera manufacturer that you have. You can just look it up. But we generally recommend going with a camera that has at least 3.0 for the USB type, so it goes faster. So there it is for tethering. Lights. Lights are really important because they are the one thing that actually lights the photo. When it comes to lights, you basically have two options. You can use a light like this, which is called a strobe light. You can also use a continuous light. This actually has a continuous light built into it, so I can actually show you with just one product. This here is a light by a company called Palsy Buff. The name of the product is called Alien Bees, and the model number, I believe, is a DB400. What's unique about this compared to a continuous light, a continuous light is very dim compared to a strobe light. Strobe lights are orders of magnitude more powerful and brighter. The advantage to that is that you can have a much smaller aperture value for your camera, which significantly increases the depth of field and the sharpness of your object. So generally speaking, using a strobe light is the best for 360 product photography. There are uses for continuous lights. Those uses are a little bit narrow, but there is a place for them in certain circumstances, specifically if you're shooting video. In fact, if you're doing video capture, then continuous lights is the only way. You can't use these. To turn them on, they're pretty simple. There's just like a little switch on the back. And a little continuous light will turn on in the center of it. There we go. It's pretty bright. With a light like this, it gives you a modeling lamp. That's actually what that continuous light is. You can also use it for video if you want. And then in the middle right here, you have a vacuum tube. And you have two pieces of metal inside of the vacuum tube. And there's a capacitor inside of it that has a charge, and then it discharges it, and a lightning bolt goes all the way through. It's actually pretty cool. You probably won't be able to see it because the video camera can't capture it, but I'll give it a couple shots and hopefully you'll be able to see something. But these are really neat because they're extremely powerful. The brightness is extremely consistent, especially with the higher quality lights. So you don't have to worry too much about the brightness flickering for every frame of the 360 view, especially if you're using a high quality strobe light. So there it is with strobe lights. All right, the next thing I'm going to talk about are modifiers. These go onto the light. Over here, we have the light. And as you can see, if you put it on its back, it's relatively easy to put a new modifier on it. Let me show you what this one is. This is actually called a Honeycomb grid. And with this, it's actually able to directionally control how the light hits the object. In fact, we actually have one on the video right over there in the corner, shining light onto this and not onto my body. So it's able to just make this area just really bright. So this is one example of a light modifier. We have another kind of product, and it's called a Softbox. I'll show that to you right now. This is a Softbox. This is a very large box, and inside of it you have some diffusers, so when the light finally comes out it looks really nice and soft. We have a Softbox up there doing the video for us, the lighting for the video. And on the back you just have an adapter that just attaches directly to the strobe light. What's nice about these is that they're able to provide a really nice light source for shooting reflective products. And just in general shooting products, almost everything with 360 product photography is shot with one of these. You usually have two on each side, and usually a background softbox for smaller objects, and for larger objects you'll usually be using a strobe light bouncing against a very large white background, like background paper or like a cyclorama cove in a studio. So there it is for the light modifiers. Turntables. Turntables are very important because they can be one of your best friends if they want to automate the photography process for shooting a lot of products. What we have here actually is a manual turntable. On the bottom you actually have a bearing, and the bearing is able to be rotated, as you can see, and has designations on the side of it. And this allows you to see how many times it's been shot, and if you have markers on it, you're able to take evenly spaced shots for your product. This is a great entry-level solution if you're just getting started and you just want to practice or just get some test shots. We also have some sample images you can download from our website if you want to have those as well. But once you start to get into the bigger leagues and you need something professional, you'll need a motorized, computer-controlled photography turntable system. So let's cover that right now. So this is a professional enterprise class photography turntable system. It's kind of a niche world that we live in, but when it comes to doing 360 views on a professional industrial level, you have entry-level products, just like pretty much everything else there is. It's like cameras. You have entry-level products, and you have enterprise class and industrial class stuff. So this is an industrial grade turntable. Something like this would be able to shoot thousands of products per week easily, and it wouldn't need any regular maintenance. It's just designed to last for a very, very, very long time. The general definition of an industrial grade product too, in terms of failure rates, usually they have a failure rate of, I think it's 0.0001% for normal use. If you're using a consumer grade product, something that's made very cheaply with inexpensive products or inexpensive materials, then you're obviously going to have a much shorter lifespan on that product, and the reliability won't be quite there. So with a motorized turntable system like this, it's able to do all the photography for you. It automatically rotates. It automatically fires the camera. It actually has these two ports here that are able to, one does actually strobe calibration, so it's actually able to calibrate to the speed your strobe lights are able to fire and automatically adjust the turntable's motor speed based on that. We have another cord here that's able to send a signal to the camera to fire at just the right time. This one here connects to your computer, and this one here connects into the wall for your building, which powers the motor in the whole system. So a system like this is professional. It's designed for industrial use and is something that can be depended on for professional applications. Accessories. Turntable accessories are great because they're able to bolt right onto your turntable, and they're able to add additional functionality that you wouldn't be able to have unless you just had that. This system here is called the Spin Shot lifter. This system is able to actually help you with centering an object left and right and front to back. It's fantastic for shooting small items. So for example, if you're shooting bugs or something like that, then you can mount it on here, and it makes the centering process extremely fast and easy. Has a little clip on it that's spring-loaded. Yeah, this is great. The next modifier we're going to talk about that attaches to a turntable is the Spin Shot riser. Currently, we're the only company in the world that makes something like this. And the reason is because we have it patented, both a design patent and a utility patent. With a system like this, it's able to attach directly to the turntable. Because it's directly connected to the turntable, it doesn't have any slippage. There are another kind of turntable that's similar to this. It's called a centerless turntable. A centerless turntable has a wheel that presses against the top plate, and it rotates it, but there's a little bit of slippage with a system like that. So it's usually going to be off by about 1 degree. With a system like this, because it's directly connected to the geared motor, it's 1-to-1, so there's no slippage at all. And with a system like that, it's going to be as accurate as the motor. And in this case, the motor is going to be accurate within a few 10,000ths of a degree. So if you're shooting something like a kitchen knife and you need it to be pointed directly at the camera, then you want to make sure that when it finishes its shot and it's all the way back, it's pointing directly where it started. If it's off by about 1/10 of a degree, that's about all it takes, then it'll be significantly noticeable and you'll be able to notice that it's off. And that's going to be a problem unless you're shooting with a system like this. So what's nice about this is that if I angle it forward a little bit more, you can see that it's like so big. You can see like a system like this is able to have basically a clear platform. So if you have a softbox right behind it, it's going to have a nice clear white background straight out of the camera without any editing. There are other systems out there that are similar like this in some kind of way, but they generally have built-in lights, and those built-in lights are very, very close to the rim and also the edge of the product. So it tends to cause a lot of wraparound light that happens on the product itself. So it tends to look really blown out. It doesn't look really good. It kind of looks like it was shot in a gigantic, like kind of cheap light box without any nice, strong, contrasty lighting. With a system like this, the lights are completely detached. So you can go as far back as you want. And the further away the background light is, the better the separation will be between the light and the product. And it'll allow you to have a really nice, clean, sharp edge on the object of the product you're shooting. So you don't need to actually shoot it twice. Some systems, you'll actually notice that they actually try to compensate for this problem by literally lighting it twice, so they actually have the background light turn off temporarily, and then they'll turn it back on. They'll do 2 shots, one with it on, one with it off, and that's because they're not able to get the lighting right with one system. If they had a system like this, they would be able to get it done in 1 shot. So basically, a system like this is able to get each shot done once, whereas the older systems with an older design, they have to take literally 2 shots for each product, which is going to take twice as much time. So with this, it's good because straight out of the camera looks good, and it's more of a professional solution. So there it is. There's the Spin Shot riser. All right, so the last thing we have is an inversion system that's able to invert the turntable. This is a fantastic tool for being able to shoot products that need to be hung upside down. So for example, one of the things, if you want to shoot a bicycle, the best thing to do is actually to mount it onto these carabiners here with some fishing string and wrap it around a couple times so it obviously doesn't break off. And then this turntable is able to rotate and it's able to shoot the products. With a motorized turntable system like this, It's able to have full granular control of the acceleration and deceleration rates. So that way you're able to shoot it and it won't wobble. With a turntable system like this specifically, this one is able to shoot products as it continuously rotates, and it calibrates to the delay of your strobe lights, so it shoots at the right angle every single time. So when you're shooting your bicycle and it's pointed directly at the camera, it'll be right on, and the front and the back wheel will perfectly line up. Now when you're shooting on this side, when you finally get to this angle, you need a very accurate turntable system, so it's able to make sure that that shot gets taken at just the right time, and that's kind of hard to do unless you have a really precise system. With a system like this, it's going to be accurate within a very, very small margin, and it'll be able to take those shots and the tires will be perfectly lined up. So there it is. There's an inversion system. Gives you a better idea of what's possible. A system like this is extremely strong. I mean, it's able to hold me. I weigh about 100 kilograms, or about 220. So you can see it's able to hold a lot of weight. Yeah, with a professional system like this, it's able to hold a lot of weight and doesn't wobble or anything like that while it's doing the photography process. So yeah, there's the inversion system. All right, so that wraps it up for our class today on 360 photography equipment. If you guys have any questions about any of the setups, we're always available. And you can give us a call or reach out to us via email. My name is Michael, and I hope you guys got something out of this tutorial.